Well, the role of us, or the Sierra Club in New York State, is basically protecting New York State's environment, but protecting the environment for all species, not only just human beings, but, again, we have a massive conservation movement with regards to preserving open space. Sierra Club was very critical early on in the movement that inspired the preservation of the Adirondacks, the forever wild that we have in the Adirondacks. The Roosevelts, Teddy Roosevelt was inspired to his conservationist end by John Muir, who was the founder of the Sierra Club. And John Muir basically took Teddy Roosevelt and many other leaders of their day out basically on outings into the woods to see the natural wonders of America. And this was competing with the post-Victorian and very early industrial era. This was a rise of us at the zenith of our industrial revolution.
I believe Teddy Roosevelt was in the Adirondacks when he learned he would become president of the United States.
Absolutely. But the thing is, the fact that he needed to preserve the Adirondacks, the fact that he eventually, because of that inspiration of Muir, eventually bought property and built up property and had a cabin, and as I said, we have the Adirondack great houses. But the concept of preservation was one of those seeds that was planted by John Muir, and absolutely it was a logical extension. But John Muir did something very elemental. We talk about how do you lobby to protect things that are dear and that are treasures, and the common, what we call the common good, and so there are things that certain Americans have, in which these assets or these things that are held or owned by the government, it's up to us as people to decide what we want to do with them. And at that particular point in time, government's idea, the manifest destiny idea, is to put them to some use. And what the conservationists and those who are on the protection end of it says, well, listen, not everything needs to be put to use. Some things we want to preserve because of their natural beauty. But more importantly, in protecting them, we protect ourselves. That logical extension wasn't made scientifically until decades later with good sciences and advances in biology, which shows how everything at a biomolecular level in water and air and soil, that we are all connected. Because remember, at that particular point in time, science had not evolved to where we were connecting disease to environmental contamination and degradation. Then it was a movement to protect the natural beauties and wonders that were basically being bulldozed under by robber barons, people who were exploring for oil. The early Rockefeller oil fields were just horrendous. I mean, oil was just spewed all over the place. They had pits and lakes, and they dumped them into open waterways. Slaughterhouses like the Tobin Meat Packing Plant were put on open waterways, and the Tobin Meat Packing Plant in the city of Albany drained into the city's water supply at Tivoli Lake, which led to them moving and relocating, but it took a massive cholera epidemic. Again, a disease resulting from an industrial use that contaminated the environment, that contaminated a water supply for an entire municipal population. So that's how we were learning by trial and error. And what John Muir did that was radical was intuitively connect that if you preserve these pristine spaces, you preserve our species as well. And it was that enlightened self-interest that allowed us not only to build and protect special places for Americans, but also build a movement that ultimately now is at the forefront of preserving and protecting environmental quality.
Speaking of environmental quality, one of the more important issues in New York State right now, especially in the western part of our state, the Buffalo, Syracuse, Rochester area, is hydrofracking and the Marcellus shale area, and getting having access to millions of cubic feet of natural gas. What is the Sierras Club's position on that? Are you guys still studying that?
Well, there's two things. Right now there's two thoughts. There's a movement toward a ban. There are those who want to actually out and out ban that, and then there's a sound movement of saying, look, we don't want to ban, just going out and ban something irrationally if we can force meaning the gas interests, to come up with environmentally sound means to do this.
The reason for wanting a ban is because there's a perceived threat of the water supply.
Well, no, there's a real threat. There's the methods and procedures are what I call the quick and dirty method. As I said, there's always two ways of doing things: the right way
and the cheap way,
and the quick and dirty way. The quick and dirty way is the way we produce a lot of things in America. We produce something and then we think about the waste later on. We produce elaborate packaging, all the furniture and all the clothes that we get. Comes with a lot of packaging and other stuff with it. And what do? We just throw it in a trash can, and we think secondary of the waste of the byproduct. And not only is it the waste and byproduct of the finished good, but even the process of production. These things have significant impacts on the environment. And that is also true with hydrofracking. So the means by which you get the natural gas, right now everybody gets focused on the gas, and other people are focusing on selling the gas, people selling leases to their land. The people get what I call gold fever. It's like the miners, 49ers that went west to California right, to get gold. People lose their mind over what they perceive to be cheap wealth. But there's no such thing as cheap wealth. It is, you may make wealth right now, but all of us will pay later. In the case of fracking, if they pursue it recklessly and irresponsibly, you run the risk of destroying and impairing the water supply of a significant portion of the state of New York, and the cascading consequences of that will be profoundly significant. Because two things: if it costs a small fortune, which is why we pay almost $5 a gallon for gas to refine oil to make gas, think about refining pure water just to get it back to its state. Nobody pays to refine water to get it back to its pure state. We just treat it and we pull it in. But now if you start pouring oil, other carcinogens and other chemicals into that water, and you're pushing it subsurface, that is where your water comes from. Our water are coming from wells out in central New York, western New York. And most of those wells in that groundwaters come back to the surface, and they fill reservoirs and other things. And if that water, the origin and source, because we right now naturally use the layers of soil, we use what God has given us in the abundance of soil and land to filter the water. Once you go right into the artery and start injecting contaminants into the artery, you no longer have the skin to protect you before it filters through, but now you're injecting it directly in. When you go to turn on your tap, those contaminants will come directly out. And we don't have a means right now to safely protect the water supply and guarantee that fracking and the fluids from fracking will not come out somebody's tap.
Another environmental issue which Governor Cuomo has been concerned about way before he became governor, and he was issuing things, and then we had Japan, is the atomic energy situation in New York State. And we have 5 nuclear power plants in New York State. We have Indian Point down around New York City.
In fact, the oldest, I believe, in the country.
We have Seabrook, New Hampshire, which both of them are about 3 hours from the capital region, which is about 40 miles north of Boston. And recently you and I were having a discussion about nuclear energy, and you were able to reduce to an elementary level exactly what is happening at a nuclear power plant. Would you explain that to our viewers?
It's one of the most funny and absurd things. What does a nuclear plant do? Everybody gets caught up in the technology, and they get caught up in the mystery of the atom and the physics behind the atom.
Right.
But all it is it boils water. That's what a nuclear power plant does. It lets the atoms, through their activity and their fission and fusion and their chain reactions, controlled chain reactions, to cook water. So if the benefit of cooking water is to produce steam, and the steam is what drives turbines and produces power, and you have the fuel to basically boil water, and it has an afterlife of hundreds of thousands of years, and it is so toxic that anything that it comes in contact, it's called irradiation. It makes them also radioactive. It contaminates them with its processes. If the risk for producing energy is dealing with one of the most toxic and deadly substance to man known in the universe, To boil water, what an absurd proposition. And people now call it clean and safe. And those folks who do that have a monetary interest. And I dare say those that do that do not have power plants sitting right next to them within a 50-mile radius. They also have the means, as they say, materially, because again, they make significant wealth from energy. But the point of the matter is, what is the risk of that energy, not to your pocketbook, but to the populations that live there? And is it something, if something, God forbid, the worst happens like we see in Japan, who's responsible? Who responds? In the case of Japan, it is not just TEPCO. You have the nation, you have all the national emergency services that you see right now responding to control that situation. And the same thing with 3 Mile Island. Of course the industry is there, and of course the owners of it will do what they got to do. But you clearly see, as in the case of TEPCO, which is the Tokyo Electrical Power Company, it's asking its workers, part of that cleanup, to go on death missions. They know that those workers will die. And think about that. That energy, just to boil water, to make steam, that should there be an accident, any worker who has to go near it usually may go on a death mission. That was the case in Chernobyl. There's some horrible pictures. If people right now are able to get some pictures of the birth defects that are still a byproduct of Chernobyl, you would say that, listen, we have to come up with a better way, and it's not clean. Nuclear energy is not a clean energy, and because we have been away from the conversation for 30 years because of 3 Mile Island, ignorance does not make it safe.
As you know, Japan, what happened to Japan was very close to Tokyo. And I think of Seabrook, New Hampshire, about 40 miles north of Boston, and then you think of Indian Point, right, which is about 30 miles north of New York, and then they're very close to the capital region.
Right.
And then you have all of the nuclear power plants out in the Syracuse, Rochester, Buffalo area. Is there... we were talking with Assemblyman Ron Cannistrari recently, and is there really an evacuation plan if what happened in Tokyo or happened in Japan happens here?
Well, there's two pieces and 2 points of absurdity that we should really be concerned about. Absurd point one is that you got the population within the 50-mile radius, which our national government said, in telling the world that with the case of Tokyo, with the plant in Japan, it should be an evacuation radius of 50 miles to be safe. In fact, we moved our populations outside of that 50-mile radius, right. Number one. If that's New York State, you're talking about evacuating New York City and Albany. Think about that. We do not have a plan. The plants are not safe, and we need to find safer alternatives, and those plants need to be brought offline.